So let's keep it moving. A lot of action here. We still have to cover. We're going to go to Virginia. Supposed to be the Keyshawn Davis show. Supposed to be his homecoming fight, his first title defense since winning that 135-pound belt versus Dennis Berichenk. Supposed to defend it versus Edwin De Los Santos. He missed weight, or should I say, maybe he didn't even try to make weight. Comes in 4.3 pounds over the 135-pound weight limit. It seemed like to me they were trying to take maybe a page out of the Ryan Garcia book versus Devin Haney. Purposely missed the weight, let the other guy drain himself, come in bigger, stronger, pay off the money, and the fight will go on. But the manager for Edwin said that's not the case. The fight is off. I just want to get your thoughts on what happened before we then get into who became the main event with the top prospect and stole the show in Abdullah Mason.
Yeah, the manager you talk about is Samson, right?
Samson Lehokowicz.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did a good job. He looked out for his fighter. I give him credit. He's a good manager. He does a good job. He did the right job. If he did the wrong job, I would say that too. So I want to give him credit. You don't see a lot of guys that always look out for their fighter and their welfare and not just think about the money. So credit to him. But look, Keyshawn Davis, he's come through a lot to get to where he's gotten to. I want to give him credit for that. Nobody's taken that away from him. He's gone through a lot in his life, in his young life. He's been given opportunities too. He's got a top promoter. He's got people that have given him the track to get to his talents to where he's gotten them. But he's worked hard to do that. He's a silver medalist from the Olympics. You know, we give him credit for all of that. But and again, from overcoming some difficulties with mental health issues, all kinds of stuff. Again, credit for that. Credit for that. But not for this behavior. There's more to being just a champion in ability. I always say, you got to fight like a champ, but you got to behave like one. And usually I mean that in the ring. But you got to also behave like one outside the ring. Because the response, what it means to be a champion, the definition of a champion is somebody, in anything they do, it doesn't have to be with gloves on. It doesn't have to be with throwing fists and dodging punches. A champion in any facet of life, any walk of life, is somebody that finds a way to overcome. He's done that. Somebody that is able to go to a place that a lot of other people would not even try to go to. He's done that. But also part of the definition and responsibility that goes with that name, champion. It invokes so many emotions, so many thoughts when you call somebody, that's a champion. And again, it doesn't have to be somebody that gets his fists raised after a fight. Wow, look at that champion over there. It's got to do with the way that they also lift up other people. The way they influence other people, just by seeing the way they do things. Because that's what it's all about. The movie, Champion, everything, Champion. Kids say, Champion. You tell a kid, you take a kid to a fight, you say, you're going to see a champion tonight. The kid's eyes light up. They get excited. Your son gets excited. You're going to meet a champion. You're going to meet the UFC champion. Yeah, I am. You're going to meet, because they're excited. They're meeting somebody special. There's a responsibility that goes along with that title, champion. And the responsibility is that you have to make sure you behave like a champion at all times. Not only in the corner, not only when you've been hurt, not only when you're tired, but at all times. Because the most important part of that word is the part that people look up to, that they expect somebody who acts and behaves like a champion. And that night, for all the good things that Keyshawn Davis has done, and he's done a lot that I already touched on, to get to where he's gotten to through life, He let himself down. He let himself down because he forgot for a moment what a champion doesn't do. He always remembers what a champion does. He answers the bell. He's shown that. But he forgot what a champion never should do. They should never put themselves in a position where they don't act in a championship way as a champion human being. You don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. But you got to make sure you're not what you allowed yourself to be that night. You can't be that. You can't be that. You're a champion. There's something that goes with that.
Yeah, things got worse. He doesn't just miss weight and ruin the homecoming fight for the hometown fans that paid for this. And it ruined things for the fans on television. Instead of seeing him, the champion, defend his title as the main event, we get a guy who was a 70-1 favorite to replace it instead. And I'm sure ESPN and others may have been thrilled by that. But when I say things got worse, after his brother Kelvin Davis lost to Nahir Albright, Keyshawn went to the locker room with his brother, other younger brother who fought on the card, Keon, and there was an altercation. It sounds like he headbutted, got into it. I don't know if jumped is the right word. Maybe it is, but should never happen. As you're saying, there's no place in sports, period, for that. And just very unfortunate turn of events and a weekend for Keyshawn Davis and his fans.
No, that's exactly what I meant when I went on to my speech there. There is no, when you have earned, and you earn the right to be called a champion, it's a privilege. It's not it's something you have to earn. And when you earn the right to be called champion, like I said earlier, a lot goes with it that has a lot more to do with life than just throwing punches. More goes with it than slipping shots, weaving shots, blocking shots, putting combinations together, setting traps. He does all of that. But to be able to earn the title, champion, to be called that, to have that come off somebody's lips, I want you to meet the champ. There's nothing greater. I want to meet the champ. There's a responsibility there that goes, like I said, far beyond putting combinations together. It's got to do with the choices you make outside the ring, in life. You are a champion. Whether I know some people say, I don't want to be a role model. Okay, fine. But you have to understand the responsibility when you have when you are called a champion, when you have earned that title, that you must understand that there's certain things that are just beneath you that are not allowable. It's not allowable to quit in a fight. You know that already. It's not allowable to spit your mouthpiece out and say, I'm not going to fight no more. It's not allowable to say no mas. Durant came back. He redeemed himself. God bless him. He did. He came back. But he suffered for that. Those things are easier for these great fighters to know, that you can't do that. You can't just stay on your knee and wait for the ref to count 10 in a tough fight and then jump up and act like you want to fight and still get that kind of recognition that you got before. No, you lost that. You can't do that. A champion cannot do that. And a champion cannot allow himself to do what a tremendous fighter, Keyshawn Davis, did when he walked into that locker room with his brother. You can't do that. I'm not going to say it anymore. That's enough. I said enough about it. The only part I add to it is that in yours, 15 years in the NFL, 15 years. I know that you have in football, baseball, basketball, in business, in everything. Everything. Me as a commentator in ESPN, I knew there was a behavioral clause in the contracts that if you behaved in a way that would embarrass the organization or endanger other people or do something that in society is not acceptable. And forget about in the football, baseball, just unacceptable in society as human beings, as decent human beings. If you do something in that kind of way, the team has the right to just cut you, to void your contract. You could have a 10-year, $100 million contract. They can void it on that right there. And I believe that promoters, managers, TV entities, they should have those same clauses that they have in the NFL, the NBA, everything else in boxing. They should have the same thing in where if your behavior becomes something that is going to embarrass the network, embarrass yourself, embarrass the sport, that you can immediately, your contract can immediately be voided. I think there needs to be something to have repercussions to remind these great athletes of the responsibilities they have, besides just throwing punches.
You're absolutely right. When the conduct is detrimental to a team, there is that out. There is that clause that you just touched on. But in this case, it comes up to the person or the entity, the promotion, to make that decision, right? I will say this, since you touched on it, we had a serious situation, very well documented with the Raiders, Antonio Brown. He was let go, but another team was happy to pick up because when there's a special talent, there's more allowances. And maybe Keyshawn is that special talent. Even if his promoter let him go, somebody else is going to pick him up. The Bucs picked up Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown wins the Super Bowl. So we will see what happens.
But that brings me to another thing, Bud, and I'm so glad you brought that up. You're so transparent, and you're just so honest about that stuff. I just think it's the responsibility of the people around. You're making money with this kid. I think you have a responsibility to do more than just make sure his jab is straight. That you have to try to be an influence in those areas. These kids do come from rough places. You have to. That's got to be part of your response, not just a yes man, not just a good cornerman, not just a good pad man. But you have to. I'm not saying his people. I don't know whose people are. But I'm just saying in general that you have to have people around you. They have to be fortunate enough to have those people, quite frankly. To have people around you that will set you straight, will tell you the things that you need to hear. And I also think the same thing goes for the commentators in the network. I know it's easy to just say things because you know the network signed them, you know the promoter signs your check, the network signs your check, you know that you want to build the guy up, but you got to be honest. And some of them have been, some of them haven't been, but some of them have been. But you got to be honest because you're not doing the guy a favor if you're not being honest, because sooner or later down the road, these things will come and they will hurt him. They hurt the sport too. They chase people from the sport. And I think that, again, the promoters, they're very guilty of that quite often. Where you said it, they're signing a talent and they're kind of close their eyes to certain behavior that they can be aware of. And sometimes they even help cover. Really. But I think that they need to have a responsibility. The network needs to hold them responsibility. Say, hey, if you're bringing somebody and we're going to pay them, and you're bringing them to our network, you got to be responsible for this guy. You have to be responsible for his behavior. And if it's not right, you know what? We're going to cancel a contract with you because you brought him. We're not going to cancel it just with the fighter. I just think there needs to be more understanding of these responsibilities across the board with all of what I'm talking about.